welcome to Corrector's Commentary with Cameron Lauder and Alex Stacey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome
Hello.
to Corrector's Commentary. I'm Cameron,
And I'm Mia.
and here this week, or this iteration, since we don't really do this on a weekly schedule, we will be talking about the 2007 movie Sunshine.
Yeah. Directed by Danny Boyle.
Yeah, which is a personal favorite of ours. It's
Yes.
something that we've bonded over.
Very much so.
And we are big proponents of it, especially the controversial third act. And we're going to talk to you in detail about why we like this movie so much, and especially why we like that controversial third act.
Yeah, for a lot of people, Sunshine had a couple of things running against it. First of all, it was released roughly at the same time as an atrocious sci-fi movie called The Core, where they went into the Earth's core instead of out into space. Where and the two kind of got conflated, and therefore Sunshine suffered for it. Then there's that third act that a lot of people dismiss. You either love it or you hate it, and still even the people who love it are like, eh, but yeah, we are here to bring the good word of the third act.
Yeah, and really the third act is it plays in a very long tradition of movies that masquerade as being hard sci-fi, whatever that really means.
Yeah.
And then take a more metaphysical turn in by the time they've concluded.
Yeah, and we are also here to argue that if you're looking for it, even just a little bit, that third act does not come in out of nowhere. There is build up to it. So this obviously assumes that you've seen Sunshine already, possibly a few times, but at least once. And so we're spoiling the ending right from go.
Right.
So,
and
yeah.
I mean, that being said, if you have no interest in watching Sunshine and are just watching it because it's us, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can play along with that. Just be sure that, or be aware that you're not getting the full experience because two loudmouths are talking over your audio.
Very much so.
All right.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is, in a few seconds, we're going to ask you to pause this MP3 or this podcast and then resume it so that we can sync up the podcast with your video. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to pause and then resume as soon as the fade to white kicks in for the Fox Searchlight logo.
Yeah, it happens pretty quick.
Yeah. So as soon as the screen goes all white, resume recording, and we will be back with you. And go ahead and pause now. And we're back.
Yep, we sure are. And right away, this is the only time that the Fox Searchlight Pictures logo is actually running backwards. Most of the time, it starts with the sun in the background and it curves around kind of counterclockwise. But in this case, Danny Boyle got permission specifically to run it backwards so that we could end on the sun.
Mm-hmm. Or what we think is the sun.
Or what we think is the sun.
Because as Cillian Murphy's narration comes over here, we assume that we're looking at the sun. He's talking about the sun, but the slow reveal is that this isn't the sun at all. This is actually Icarus II's sun shield.
Yeah.
And the idea that the ship, and particularly the thing that they are using to protect themselves from the sun's heat and light and radiation, can be mistaken for the sun, plays heavily into the film's themes of divinity, where they speak about the sun quite religiously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But not with any specific orthodoxy. But the language they use to describe the sun is the language of someone having a religious experience.
Yeah.
And the idea that here we see their ship also possessing the same visual cues as that deity or that god.
Yeah, and here we go with the turn.
Yeah. Is kind of critically important to it. And I think it's very important that it's the first thing we see.
I agree. And then we're also about to see another of the film's major themes. The sun plays into it, obviously, very, very heavily, but another one of the really, really often used visual themes in Sunshine is eyes and irises and pupils. And yeah, so here we go, right about now.
Yeah. As you can see, this rapidly contracting pupil, essentially, against the iris of the sun.
Yeah.
Which, foreshadows, I think, a bit of the the dread and anxiety that will come later in the film.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the physiological response that causes a contracting pupil, then, I mean...
Oh, absolutely. So, what I love... where is it? Yes, Searle. I love the scene so much, and I love Searle because he represents this... He is the sort of stepping stone on the journey to eventually Pinbacker. How religious adoration and religious ecstasy becomes obsession and just intolerance of anything other than the belief.
Yeah, because here we have Searle kind of in the temple.
Yeah.
Having a pseudo-religious experience as he contemplates the sun, and not only contemplates he's not only appreciating it as kind of this intensely pleasurable light bath that he'll describe later, but he's experiencing in very explicit terms, the danger of the sun.
Yeah.
As the ship's computer tells him that, we can adjust the filter up so that you can experience more daylight or sunlight, but it's dangerous for you.
And I love right about now at 3.1%, these shots are so much foreshadowing, like right away for who we eventually meet in the third act.
Right. And here we also see
the eye again.
Searle's eyes, and we also see light as a physical enveloping presence.
Yeah. And
which the movie comes back to again and again, that sunlight isn't an abstract thing in this film. It's not just waves in space. It is it's fluid, it's liquid, which is how Searle describes it.
Yeah, and it's one decision I really enjoy as well was Danny Boyle and I guess the cinematographer's decision to really make all of the interiors, except for one room, all the interiors of the Icarus II, very cool colors. Everyone's wearing blues and grays and greens. And it serves as a rest for your eyes because when the sun is filmed in sunshine, and when we see it, especially when it cuts to sort of outside the ship, it is so imposing. There's this high-pitched sort of sound design behind it as well. It's very overwhelming, and so we cut to this piece of shade.
Yeah, this cool, calm,
haven,
safe environment.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to draw your attention to back there was we see Trey and
Mace.
They're having they're friends, right?
Yeah.
Like they have a very different rapport than Mace has with almost anyone else on the ship, and I think that plays very heavily into what happens with Mace and Trey later. Yeah,
Mace being, of course, Chris Evans,
and
future Captain America.
But they have a very unique relationship on this crew where they behave like very good friends.
Yeah.
And I think what happens later with Trey affects Mace much more than he's willing to discuss with anyone.
Yeah.
Which is why what he does later seems so out of character.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was two more things, actually. What they're discussing right now here is that they're passing a certain kind of event horizon wherein they won't be able to communicate with home anymore. And there are several of those thresholds that they cross over in the course of this movie. But this is kind of the first one they've had in several years.
Yeah.
The other was...
final.
Yeah, this is very final. The earlier one was Cillian Murphy's monologue over the ship about how they are returning all of Earth's fissile materials to the sun. And the idea that, the stellar bomb can restart a sun that is failing in some way that is kind of, it's explained it's a vaguely physically plausible thing that could happen. And if this was to happen, I suppose this is a vaguely plausible strategy humans could have to save themselves. But none of that actually matters. It doesn't matter. What matters is the conceptual and philosophical language he uses where they are returning. They have mined all of Earth's fissile material, all of the elements like uranium, plutonium,
Yeah.
that are exclusively created during the death of a sun and the violent death of a sun in a supernova, and that are found nowhere else in nature, and bringing it back to revive the sun.
Yeah, and really, this is, I feel, the second greatest sacrifice that humanity could make. Humanity as it is, in the 21st century, the greatest sacrifice is ourselves, but the second greatest is our power.
Yeah.
Literally, a lot, like our infrastructure power, but also our power to be separate nations with borders.
Yeah, as Orwell described it in his essay about totalitarianism in England, the terrible stability brought about by nuclear weapons.
Yeah, that's gone now.
Yeah, that has all been surrendered.
Yeah, Earth has undergone some major shifts, and that is incredibly profound. And especially considering who we are right now, it's a very, very important and beautiful sort of sacrifice.
It is. And again, it is a very kind of religious sacrifice in that you are taking something dear to you and laying it on the altar for the god.
Yeah.
And another point that's never really commented on is that Icarus, the first ship, was carrying half of Earth's fissile material. And for those of you who are maybe a bit more familiar with the language of mysticism, that is, nobody's fooled when you don't lay everything on the line.
Yeah.
Least of all your gods.
Yeah.
So the idea that they kind of like, we're gonna half-ass the sacrifice.
Yeah. It's the same sort of thing of if this is your first night at Fight Club, you have to fight.
Yes,
there are no tourists. You have to go all in or none at all. And so, yeah. This is a good time to talk about the really phenomenal cast and how especially these two act like really relatively small roles, especially for Kaneda.
Yeah.
But so human and so real.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things is that people just assume that this, they say, oh, it turns into a slasher in the third act. No, it doesn't. People do die and, sort of one at a time, but there's no one ever holds the idiot ball in Sunshine.
Yes.
Not once.
Yeah, nobody ever contrives a reason to be turned into a special effect. And so here they are past that event horizon they were discussing earlier, where they are now alone. And the one that we see earlier, the first time we're introduced into the ship, is the picture of the entire crew just before the hatch is sealed, which was kind of their first threshold.
Yeah.
And now they've crossed another one.
Yeah. And so, the thing about Icarus 2 that was different from Icarus 1 is they brought a psychologist who was Searle, which is very important in a lot of ways, but it's very curious because they right now don't know why Icarus 1 disappeared. But someone felt that there was this thing.
That they were starting to get weird messages back from Icarus.
Yeah, they sure were. We'll see one in just a couple of minutes. And they thought to, out of all of, they have a botanist, they have engineers, they have navigators, they have a physicist, but a psychologist is such a soft science. Yeah.
That this mission is about more than their proximate payload.
Yeah.
That they also have to practice, self-care.
Oh my God, I love this. I love John Murphy's score, but these moments specifically, this motif is gorgeous.
And actually, the conversation that Searle and Mace had just before this is one of the only times this movie falls flat for me, where Mace is being very kind of petulant.
Yeah.
And acting like it's his first time in the chair.
Yeah.
Whereas, Mace is otherwise gives the impression of having been at least once a very stable, very serious person.
Yeah.
Who seems like the most traditional of the astronaut types. Like when NASA sent the Apollo astronauts to the moon, they found the squarest motherfuckers they could, because that emotional mental stability is critical to everything else that happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love it. The greens are so blown out in these early scenes. It's wonderful. It's very sad considering what goes on later, but it's so nice initially because it's life. That's their garden.
Yeah, and
in a lot of ways, that is their garden.
A capital G garden.
Yup.
And
okay.
Here we meet
Pinbacker. Mm-hmm. So the captain of Icarus 1. We don't know why he disappeared, and I always used to forget about this particular video until I watched to research for this commentary.
Right.
And I was like, oh, hi there. There you are. But immediately, he's talking about it's, very, very professional. And then it pauses or rewinds. It is so significant that they zoom in on that line and then pause on his pixelated eyes.
Yeah. The visual chaos that surrounds Pinbacker in this movie is very significant in considering that light is really the medium of film.
Yeah.
Right? It's a visual, we always say it's a visual medium, and what that means is that it involves collimated beams of light going into our eyes.
It's a series of still images being thrown at us at a very rapid rate through a light bulb.
Yeah, and the idea of the sun is kind of, our primary source of light that our eyes...
Yeah.
That we
The first camera obscura was the sun.
Mm-hmm. So the idea that Pinbacker's light is bad...
Yeah.
Or chaotic,
that
or
it literally,
scattered.
Well, and that it literally is warping the film. That was the point. And Danny Boyle actually mentioned, we will see how he freaks out and, you can't quite get a good look at him. Mm-hmm. That's on purpose because he warps, in a very bit of meta, he warps the film itself. So...
That that Pinbacker is one of those, has crossed another threshold that nobody else in this movie crosses.
But we'll get to him for sure. Mm-hmm. We have much to say about Pinbacker.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mercury for a second, and this beautiful little scene where they've been together for 16 months. Mm-hmm. They've lived as a family, essentially, and here they are witnessing this tiny little planet, this little blip, cross the sun, and... then we're going to see, they're going to swing around Mercury in a bit, and you just sort of see how tiny Icarus is beside Mercury, and how tiny Mercury is beside the sun, and how gigantic and literally unfathomable the sun truly is. That's one of the really important parts of this film, is it gives so much weight and size
and sense of scale
to the sun.
Here I really like Harvey, who's the comms officer and the second officer of the ship, or the first officer, who's a very kind of like, his job is very auditory, but even here on Icarus, that auditory job where his job is to listen is parsed in a column of light.
Yep.
That he has to suspend himself in a column of light.
Yeah. That's Icarus against Mercury, and Mercury's tiny.
Mm-hmm.
little bit of an allusion to how basically space movies are submarine movies, or spaceship films are submarine films, and vice versa in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the kind of
Here's the
sonar
radar.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of doubling and reflections
Mm-hmm.
in this scene, especially.
Right, where they're weighing options.
Yeah. There's going to be a shot of Searle in a second that is pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Extremophiles deep under the ocean probably be fine.
Maybe, well, for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But that's not the point right now. This shot, gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here is Searle giving two options.
Mm-hmm.
That's his reflection being... Oh, no, it's not. But...
Yeah. Well, I think that ambiguity is
Yeah.
part of
Right
the point.
there. Yeah. The other thing that you'll notice is, of course, that Searle gets more and more tan without
Yeah.
anyone saying a word.
Yeah, and he gets more and more sunburned, and nobody asks him about it.
Yeah. That is visual storytelling. Like, oh, that's how you do.
This always struck me as a very wonderfully grown-up conversation.
Yeah.
This looks so much better than every simulation I've ever run.
It's I love this scene too. I love a lot of scenes in Sunshine, but another example, another bit of proof about just how huge and how unknowable the sun is, and it is an event horizon.
Mm-hmm. That
That's where it stops.
Yeah, the utility of being able to predict what's coming has dropped.
Yeah.
That the sun is itself, the interaction, what they're doing here is largely unknowable.
Yeah. He is talking about a black hole. I mean, and the sun is getting there. It'll never be one, but the sun and the black hole are, they're very, very related. That's one comes from the other. And so, yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the surface of the sun in that simulation is very sort of topological.
Yeah. That
waves and circles.
That it is, that what's happening here is probabilistic.
Yeah.
That they can make hopeful predictions and educated guesses, but...
That's it.
Yeah, there's no absolutes about what's happening here.
Kappa's dream.
Yeah, or Kappa's nightmare, Kappa's dream. That the light here is also very, has that quality of not having rubbed the sleep out of your eyes yet.
Yeah.
Or being scattered by eyelashes.
Yeah. He's not really falling into the sun in that dream, though.
No, he's falling someplace else.
Yeah.
And that here we're presenting the idea that maybe what you think you're afraid of isn't actually what you're afraid of. Or maybe what your anxieties aren't what you think they are.
Yeah. I love the panels flutter a little bit like wings. A little bit like feathers.
Yeah.
Layered upon layer upon layer.
Yeah.
Oh, God. This is the kind of mistake that I genuinely have nightmares about.
Yeah, yeah. That you've done everything that you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Except for the thing that you forgot about that wasn't explicitly part of what you were supposed to do. But it was still your responsibility.
Yeah. Like...
Well, nobody... You told me to put the groceries away, but not to close the fridge door.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like... It's like you put all of this... For instance, all of this effort into... moving to a different city and packing up and changing all of these things, and you get there and you've forgotten to register for classes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, there's
You're like,
the nightmare.
I did everything right except for this one big thing. For the record, I did not forget to register for classes. I checked today.
Well, of course you checked today.
And... we are heading into one of the best paced scenes in in this film certainly, and in film recently. I really feel like Danny Boyle has sort of gone up and down in terms of the quality of his films. He always picks projects that he likes, I think. I don't
Right.
think he's ever made sort of a sort of film. But really, I see Sunshine and 28 Days Later as a pair, because they were both written by Alex Garland as well, and had the same lead actor. And to a lesser extent, Trainspotting, as these three films that set up that you assume take place in reality until they don't.
Yeah, that have. Well, Trainspotting probably would be very recognizable in the sense of like a magic realism.
Yeah.
And 28 Days Later is a horror movie, and this is a science fiction movie, and they all have a veneer of verisimilitude.
Yeah. Enough that you sort of assume at first that you're watching something that takes place roughly in real life. Mm-hmm. In our universe with our rules. But it's never outright said.
No. Well, he never claimed he was making a hard sci-fi movie here.
Originally, Kappa and Cassie were in a relationship, and there was actually a sex scene written into the script that they very early on were like, this is a bad idea, thankfully.
This seems inappropriate.
Yeah.
Or very least unnecessary for these characters' relationships.
But there's the leftovers of it are so good because they do end up together a lot, and there is something of a relationship, whether that's very close friendship, whether she likes him, whether there's been something.
There's an element of trust and familiarity, and
she was in his bunk, and he didn't seem all that surprised by it.
Yeah, well,
so they're either bunkmates or are close enough that she can be like, drop in while he's asleep.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that very, for one, kind of plausible for a crew of this nature, but it's also very much more than the kind of locker room casual familiarity that you see in a lot of other places. They treat each other very what's the word I'm even looking for here? I've used familiarity so often, and it's not that, but there's care.
Yeah. Dad will fix it.
Yeah, Dad is going out there, and he's going to come back when everything is fixed.
Yep. He is on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the nice things about Sunshine was that every role was blind cast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, think about it, and this is like the key to writing. Like, how do you write strong female characters? You write a strong character.
Right.
And then cast a woman. Yeah, every single role was up for both male and female options. And they found whoever worked best.
Okay.
But it makes a lot of sense. They're just no one is the girl.
No.
So yeah, definitely Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember if Kappa. I think Kappa was always going to be Murphy.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah.
Interesting bit of trivia here. Or I don't know if it's interesting or if trivia can ever be actually interesting. The sun outside of our atmosphere is white.
Yeah.
Tending very, very slightly to pink.
I didn't know about pink.
Yeah.
It's
just on that end of the Planck curves.
Huh. Interesting.
So when we see the sun here with its golden light, that's filmmaking artifice.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they
And
also had to put stars in the background because otherwise you
Yeah.
can't show the ship is moving.
Yeah, yeah. But like the sun we see in this film is deliberately a much warmer feeling entity than a harsh white or pink
Yeah.
sun would be.
It's too funny.
If you want to call that warmth.
Yeah. Easy for you to say.
And yeah, there's the artifact of another threshold that they've crossed, the destroyed communications towers.
Yeah.
So even when they do complete their mission and come back home, they won't be able to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
They're now even more isolated and cut off.
Yeah.
And it's the wounded communication tower here that starts the next disaster. And honestly, it could have been anything. They could have
Yeah.
contrived anything they wanted to
Yeah.
be the instigating element or the spark for the next disaster. But they chose the wounded communication towers.
Yeah.
As if that isolation itself has a cost.
Yeah. Well, and there's a big difference between having the option and not at all.
Yeah.
Like, you can, there's a big difference when something is, between something that you're just not using or you can't use and something that's gone.
Yeah.
There is no option.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that can be hoarder talk.
Sure, yeah.
But it's also here, like, nobody's going to know now what happened to them. They've gone into the unknowable.
Yeah.
And they're at the instant of celebration.
Yeah.
It's cut off by the light, the sun's light reflecting off the comms tower into the garden.
Yeah.
Something Morningstar Gardens. I don't know.
There's more garden stuff coming up later. Two things that this film does really well in terms of it tapping into something very, very deep personally. One, Kappa's dream of falling into the sun. I've had one of falling into Jupiter, which was a similar kind of feeling of just gone. And two is the suits and the tiny little eye slit and just being unable, just crawling in slow motion.
Yeah,
we'll get to that more later as
agonizing
well.
slowness of their movements, their feel of helplessness.
Yeah.
And their sanctuary.
Yeah.
Their cool green sanctuary. This entire sequence, the cinematography here and the composition of the shots is just gorgeous.
Yeah. There comes a time when, you can say all you want, oh, there's no room for emotionality. I am totally, objective. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Not at all.
Nobody ever is. And I've mentioned before that in this film, light has a physical presence.
Yeah.
Like the liquid light. In a moment, we're going to see the opposite of that, a darkness with a physical liquid presence to it. But just the idea that it's sunlight reflecting into the oxygen garden through an open window, or an unshielded window.
Yeah.
That there are some things you can see that will set you afire.
Yeah.
Right? In a very literal sense in this movie, but there you can see some shit in this world that changes you.
Yeah. That's such a haunting image.
It is.
Yeah. That's the other thing, another sense of scale. How big is the part of the shield that they're on that's still in shadow?
Mm-hmm.
And that is 11% of it.
Yeah.
This is a huge shield.
Yeah.
That mofo is big. Physical darkness.
Yeah. Like a consumptive darkness.
Yeah. Which
or
is
an invasive.
Well, and smoke is the result of fire, which is in this case light and fire are very much intertwined with the sun. So yeah. And what does Searle say?
Mm-hmm.
And all we see of him is the distortion and the eyes and the distortion here and on the camera, and then he's gone.
Yeah. Well, and the complicated kindness of Searle's questions.
Yeah. Very much so, because that's the kind of question that a psychologist asks when you are in when you're incredibly upset, when you are facing these sorts of horrible decisions, maybe not, necessarily your imminent death, but they ask these, how do you feel?
Right.
What do you see? They ask you to reflect on it in a different way.
Right.
So, on the one hand, it's a very humane, you're right, kind question, because it is, rather than focus on, oh my god, I'm going to die, it's, what do I see? It's a redirect of thought. On the other hand, it's an incredibly selfish question for Searle, because he is becoming addicted to that, or obsessed.
Yeah. It's not only the kind of question a psychologist would answer someone who's in distress, but it's an inquisitive one.
Yeah.
It's a sincere question from Searle.
all Harvey wants is to go home.
Mm-hmm.
All he's wanted this whole time is to go home.
Yeah.
And
well, the film does such a wonderful job of just actually letting him say, I want to go home, without having to contrive all the, like, surrounding bullshit about, like, I just want to see my kids again.
Yeah.
Or my wife was pregnant.
Yeah.
No, he just wants to go home because I don't think anyone signed up for the mission going like, yeah, I don't want to come home.
Yeah.
But Harvey is allowed to be homesick.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing where, he can say, I want to go home. He never actually says it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just hinted at with acting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So here we have Kappa visiting the payload, which is an entirely unique environment.
Mm-hmm. And Cassie, too.
Yeah. Well, it's this brutalist industrial place that's lit by, like, very harsh kind of spotlights.
Yeah.
And has a very unfinished look because, I mean, it's all going to get blowed up, right?
It reminds me of is, I'm probably going to get the name wrong, but the Vogon ship from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy film.
Oh, yeah.
It's a similar, very tall, very, like, a lot of vertical lines and a lot of just bare metal and light and, like, pot lights.
Yeah, that it's very deliberate in its functionality.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was designed by somebody who also who was very deliberate in wanting to portray a functional environment.
Yeah.
I really enjoy Kappa's description of the device.
Yeah.
There is a very similar conversation in one of my favorite plays called Copenhagen that occurs between between Heisenberg and oh, come on, brain. But they're describing the collision cross-section of nuclear fission.
Yeah.
And that one neutron knocks apart an atom, releasing a little bit of energy and maybe one or two more neutrons. And each one of those collisions releases about enough energy to move a speck of dust.
Yeah.
And then they say until enough collisions have occurred to move, say, 2 to the 80 specks of dust.
Yeah.
Which is the equivalent to a city and all those who live within it.
Yeah.
And here we meet Icarus 2.
Or 1.
Or Icarus 1, yeah. Illuminated for the first time with the sun's reflected light.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, all light, most
They're
of our light
bouncing.
is, yeah.
Yeah, that back half, or the back side of the ship, which is so dark all the time, is, in this case, being illuminated.
Yeah, by that same divine golden light.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of foreshadowing, considering what happened to it.
Yep.
Or what happened on board, or what we're allowed to believe happened on board.
Yeah. It's also very interesting that they built, I mean, not necessarily, I guess, but that they have an airlock, you know? Because I guess airlocks can be used for many different things, but, you know...
Presumably they had to get people on board.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Oh, but that they can actually detach the ship in a reversible way from the shield, and
attach themselves to Icarus One.
yeah,
Which, as I say it, like it would probably all be standardized.
yeah.
Also, they definitely got that shield up there in parts, because there's no way that shape is breaking the Earth's gravitational hold.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, nope. Sorry, sir.
But just going back to the first point that I
Yes.
think I made in this, I really, really, really love the image of the shield as the sun, because the first thing we're told is that humans are returning this divine power to the sun, because that is one of the best questions science fiction can ask us. But here we see something else entirely. And I'll
Yes.
come back to that later on. Don't worry about that. But here we enter into
Icarus One, and that is not a glitch in the film that you're seeing. They have spliced one frame images every time one of the flashlights directly crosses the plane of the camera. It flashes with one of the Icarus One crew members.
and Icarus is full of human skin flakes.
Yep. That's dust.
Yeah, it feels like a mausoleum right now.
Yeah.
But as we'll discover in a few minutes, it's not quite right. It's a crematorium. And how long again was it that Icarus has been missing for? They lost contact 7 years ago,
Yeah.
right? That's colloquially kind of the time it takes for every cell in a human body to be replaced.
Yep.
Lost and replaced. So the person we meet here is entirely different than the one who left the Earth.
Yeah.
It's an entirely new person, conceptually.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that that's a very deliberately chosen length
Yeah.
of time, especially considering, like, the fact that dead skin, dead human tissue is coating every surface of the ship.
Yeah.
Those are the persons they left behind, that they've abandoned, that they've shed,
Yes.
that have been burned away in the crucible of this experience and replaced with something utterly new.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, we also see that reflected a bit with Searle, where he's continually peeling off dead skin.
Poor Harvey. You can't return to the garden.
Silly rabbit. The one thing that you would expect if there were still people here would be that this would all be disturbed in some way.
Yeah.
That you would see maybe a footprint,
Yeah.
but they haven't.
A footprint does show up later.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, shows you what I know.
No, but it's in a different context. We'll come to that. And I've always wondered the significance of that particular test.
Yeah.
I haven't figured it out yet.
Well, we don't really see much water in this movie.
No, it's the coolant, but that's not necessarily water.
No, that would be glycol or something.
Yeah.
But the idea that Pinbacker has cultivated an artificial garden
Yeah.
to be one with God again is
Yeah.
evocative.
he is correct in that sense.
And what Pinbacker here is talking about is, I think, one of the best reasons why we need science fiction.
Yeah.
That we challenge God all the time.
Yeah, we do.
And it's kind of important for us to do that, because otherwise we are utterly at the mercy of our universe.
Yeah.
And being able to challenge what people who were significantly less sophisticated than us associated with divinity is really important, because otherwise we're helpless out here.
And, you know, that is the last time that we really see Pinbacker, other than a couple of, like, flashbacks to connect the dots. That video is the last time we see Pinbacker in anything even resembling human reaction. He's burned literally to a crisp. He's black, and, like, those are 4th degree burns.
Yeah, he's burning.
He's burning, but he's not dying.
Mm-hmm. There must be a word for that.
Yeah, well...
Well, what he's undergoing is a kind of a perpetual ecstasy.
Yeah.
Right? In I guess the Christian Gnostic sense.
Yep, and he's also being bathed in a huge amount of radiation.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is, like, for all the people who just freak out at how, you know, how Pinbacker kind of kills the realism of it, for all that they sort of yell about that, we don't necessarily know what would happen to cells exposed to that amount and that kind and that frequency of radiation for that long. It's entirely possible that they wouldn't, you know, you could slowly acclimate.
Yeah.
You wouldn't potentially burn up and go.
Here, if I can just break away from that for a moment.
No.
Here we, when I first saw this movie, I remember thinking that these people weren't restrained.
Yeah.
That they were in kind of positions of, if not peace, at least they seemed meditative.
They remind me quite a lot of the victims of Pompeii.
Yeah, that these people weren't executed.
No.
That they were here at least willingly,
Yeah.
or with some kind of understanding of what was going to happen to them.
Because they were sitting up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's really hard to restrain someone and then sit them on a bench.
Yeah. But then again, after what we see Pinbacker do later in the film, that maybe that is another bit of Pinbacker's theater.
Yeah.
And here, like, they have to wipe the dead skin, the dust off the portals, off the surfaces they try to use. This transformation, or the metamorphosis that the Icarus crew underwent is, it obscures things, it clogs things, it obstructs them.
Yeah.
It confuses.
Yeah. Well, and it's so personal. Like, if that was all sand, it wouldn't be as creepy. It's not just that it's dirt or dust. It's that it's the composition, like, that they know. Because here on Earth, you can at least sort of kid yourself of, oh, some of it's dirt, some of it's cat hair, some of it's like crumbs or something, whatever. That is all human.
Yeah, 100% pure X meat.
Yep. But Harvey wants to go home.
Mm-hmm.
Now Mace stands behind Kappa.
Mm-hmm.
Quite literally. This is plausible. Plausible. Very much. Very, very plausible. Yes. You do not instantly freeze. You would get the bends pretty quickly, but not that quickly. It would be incredibly cold. Frostbite would be a big, big danger. Well, you would survive this.
Radiation isn't a very efficient means of losing heat.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it would take a while for the cold to really set in.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the one bit that was kind of fudged, was to give Harvey that beautiful sort of breaking
that he finally, like, literally as well as psychologically shatters.
Yeah. Searle wanted to do it. Yeah. Like, this is a setup. This is fishing for, I will do it.
Yeah, I'm going to... Yeah.
Because he found the bodies. He has seen, like, this is the... God, I love Harvey. Like, no, Searle saw the victims of Icarus 1, the former crew. He saw validation. He got validation back that someone else has done this.
Yeah.
That someone else felt what he felt, and this was his opportunity to go into a corner and literally just ride the high, the ultimate high. You know, at this point, I don't think he even necessarily cared about getting back.
Yeah. That he doesn't... That the other crew rode that high to their end, and he doesn't know what other end... He can't imagine a different end now.
Yeah, but he wants that one.
Alex and I have this joke where we say that if we were ever to do a movie for Corrector's Commentary like Full Metal Jacket, the entire commentary time would just be spent with us going, "Oh, I love this," and the other person going, "Shut up! I'm trying to watch."
Yeah. You and I have seen this enough that, we, but no, I understand. And there are parts of this that you just want to sit and watch. And
yeah, that you kind of just,
yeah.
So if we ever, those times when we're just not saying anything, it's because we like this part.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that Harvey's arm shatters, and the Icarus 1 crewmate, when Searle discovers them, it's an arm that falls.
Yeah, that crumbles.
That crumbles at the same second as the airlocks decouple. It's Harvey's arm that crumbles, and it's Pinbacker's arm as well later on.
Yeah, that fails.
Yeah. Off you go. Icarus 2's shield looks larger than Icarus 1.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, second chance, you'd probably be like,
Maybe,
just in case.
Yeah. Maybe it was the shield. Let's make it 10% bigger?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, might as well. Yeah, let's do that. I notice now that Cyril doesn't sound like a burning man there. He sounds like somebody who's drowning.
Yeah. Cassie is essentially Kaylee from Firefly. Same sort of typical character, but vastly different tone, obviously. But she's the human.
Yeah, well, and she's also... She's calling them out here, right?
Yeah.
There's... She knows that the vote is artifice,
Yeah.
right?
Find a kindness. So, yeah, if you're paying attention even a little bit, Pinbacker is very well set up. The airlock decouples somehow.
Yeah, that was weird.
That sure was strange. Oxygen is being used by a certain amount of people.
There are 2 scalpels missing.
Yeah. Now, the question which remains unanswered is, was this Trey or was this Pinbacker?
And we do have an authoritative declaration on the subject.
Yeah.
Which is that Danny Boyle has said that this is Pinbacker.
Yeah.
Who has murdered Trey and then set up this kind of very cruel a program in the simulation room here that is very theatrically allowing the crew to believe that Trey committed suicide. But as far as Danny Boyle is concerned, Trey was murdered.
Yeah, and Corazon actually has, there's a little bit of beauty in, we don't know if she crawls over when she dies. She dies holding her plant.
Right.
And we don't know whether she crawled over to die like that. Or whether he posed her like that.
Yeah.
I don't know which one is more heartbreaking. Probably that she crawled. Here is an attempt to return to normalcy.
Yeah.
Of the two of them fighting. It's what they do, but they can't anymore.
No, they can't keep up the artifice anymore.
Yeah.
One thing I'd also like to discuss is we keep saying that they discuss the sun using religious language and that Pinbacker is going to be revealed as being a very religious character, an extremist. But he uses the language of religion and of a certain kind of faith, but it's not an orthodox faith by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very kind of mystical one.
Mm-hmm. Which existed before the orthodoxy anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
In a lot of ways.
There's something very primal about what Pinbacker has found out here, or thinks he has found out here.
Yeah, it's sort of like the difference between sort of Judaism before and after the destruction of the Second Temple. Before, it was incredibly based around the temple and the sacrifices and the donations, and they held a lot of power, and afterwards is when a lot of the ritual developed. So yeah, Pinbackers is this primal is a very good word for it.
Yeah, there's something very old about the way Pinbacker is interpreting what's happening out here. But like, from what I understand, like, sacrifice is very a cornerstone of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement.
Yeah. This is, and as an aside, this scene is so great.
Yeah, well, I remember the first time I saw this scene, I was like,
yeah,
there's someone else on board. Who is it? What is it?
Yeah. And when he asks, there's a flash.
Mm-hmm.
Because Pinbacker is warping time.
Yeah, and this is on one element, or in one sense, this is Kappa's dawning realization, his revelation.
Yeah.
That it's Pinbacker, but it's also Pinbacker intruding.
Yeah. Because when you get that close to the sun, time and space warp.
And here we finally meet Pinbacker.
Yeah.
In his ecstasy.
Yeah. Are you an angel? I don't think he's talking about, this is very much a, the angel as unknowable, assistant, or an aspect of God, with 5 faces, or the wheel covered in eyes.
Yeah,
that kind
the
of
wheels
an angel.
of fire and the 7-eyed serpents.
Yeah.
This is not the beautiful blonde in robes with wings. This is something
Much more primal.
Yeah.
And that's true of Icarus too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there will be records that they sent them out, but they'll never know.
Yeah, they won't. Nobody will ever know what happened out
Yeah.
here.
The last man alone with God. And he seems so benevolent in these first moments until Kappa says his name.
Yeah.
And until he says, "My God." And he blasphemes.
Yeah. There's the other scalpel.
Yeah. Like, he really was in the midst of a religious ecstasy. He was so gentle. He was so just... It was meditative, that first, few bits of dialogue. So, yeah, and here we see you never get a good look at Pinbacker.
No, yeah, even the camera is afraid of him.
Yeah, the camera can't process him.
That he is...
Which is such a brilliant choice.
It is. It's a very efficient way of communicating what's going on here. That Pinbacker has crossed over a threshold that we can no longer easily parse rationally. That Pinbacker has become something very... well, very difficult to understand, but very dark.
Yeah. It's... everybody who dislikes this third act just says, yeah, it turns into a slasher film at the end. No, it doesn't, because nearly half the crew is dead before we meet Pinbacker.
Yeah.
One by one they did die, but half the crew is dead already by their own screw-ups and attempts to fix.
Yeah.
So it wasn't actually him that did it, except for Harvey, but... But... There are his
the
footprints. Yeah. So, where was... I had something to say about the coolant. Yes.
Oh,
the coolant had been sabotaged in Icarus 1, and it's sabotaged here because coolant is the omega to the sun's alpha.
Yeah.
Like,
that it's the
it's
counterbalance.
Yeah. But, it's the opposite. It is the balance, but in extremism, there is no room for that opposition, even if it is vital for balance.
Yeah, even if there's a philosophical or doctrinal or conceptual need for a balance, a yin-yang. For a fanatic, there is none.
Yeah, you're not allowed to question.
Mm-hmm.
There is no patience.
No.
Or allowance for that kind of nuance.
No.
For that flesh. So he sabotages the coolant. Because he puts her down like that. And he looks at the plant, so I wonder now if he also staged Corazon's...
I think he did.
Yeah.
He's going through and he's sabotaging the ship.
Yeah.
In every way he can find.
That's such a smart... that's another thing. Again, this film is so smart in so many little ways, and that's one of them right there, is Kappa putting on that vest.
Yeah.
Because... he has no time to bandage any of this. That's what you do.
Yeah, you find something.
Yeah, or if you collapse a lung, that's what you do. You put on a vest or you wrap yourself even in saran wrap
right.
just to get it closed for the moment. But it's such an immediate medical thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful little character moment, this little bobblehead
Yeah.
of Cassie's. How good of a hide-and-seek player were you?
Not very.
I was really good at it. I do find it interesting that Cassie gets sort of set up as, I mean, she is technically the final girl, but whether that is a capital F, capital G, is debatable, I think. I mean, I don't think it was even necessarily a nod to slasher films.
No, no. So, like, I mean, we've been talking about how the film communicates what's happened to Pinbacker and how it communicates what his mentality is, but why did it happen to him? Right? Like, we saw earlier with Kappa trying to decide whether to go for the second payload or not, that he's studying how the payload is supposed to behave near the sun, and he doesn't know.
Yeah.
So what happened to Pinbacker when he became the payload, when he crossed that other threshold?
Yeah.
That he could no longer rationalize what was going on around him, and so he fell into this kind of absolutist fanaticism.
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes down to, in part, a question that I think is an issue for a lot of things right now, but it's how well do you sit with the unknown?
Yeah.
Do you need an answer on a fundamental level? I think Pinbacker did. I think that he was able to push it down and push it down and push it down. He was a very, very capable, like, he may not have even been religious in his adult life. But when push came to shove, he needed that answer of, he needed to know, he couldn't sit with that uncertainty as well as Kappa can.
Yeah. Yeah, that Kappa is kind of very used to that uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that he doesn't like not having the answers, but he's comfortable with the answers not being available.
Yeah.
And I think it's also something more fundamental here, that that Pinbacker was very uncomfortable with the power he wielded.
Yeah.
And thought that he ultimately came to the conclusion that it's not for humanity to manage the life of the sun like this. Whereas, kind of, I mean, Spinoza would have said, if you can do it, then it kind of is your responsibility to be able to manage that power. And I think that's what Einstein was getting at also when he was talking about the responsibility we wield with our nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that's very central to the Tao as well, that you have an ethical responsibility to manage the power that you wield.
Yeah.
And that your moral responsibility is to the power you wield, not just out of, like, That's very tautological. But the idea is that if you can do it, then that means you have to,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think,
And that Pinbacker decided that no, he wasn't comfortable with that power, therefore nobody should have that power at all.
and I don't think that was a conscious, like, you know what, I'm not comfortable with it. It was a very, very raw, reflexive sense,
Well,
I think.
I think it's Pinbacker was confronted by the enormity of the sun, like the actual, like in the formal sense, the enormity of the sun, and broke. He experienced horror at the scale of the sun relative to his own experience and his own capabilities, and broke.
Yeah, well, when I was 15 years old, I went to Poland to the concentration camps. And I did prep beforehand. We had learned about the history, and I was even warned, like, you may react in ways that you didn't expect, but I didn't really listen because I'm an emotional person. I figured I would cry, I'd be upset, and I felt nothing. I shut down emotionally, and it was very disconcerting to actually come face to face with it and to not know how to react and not recognize your reaction. But it was very, very primal. It was just a big defense mechanism I didn't even realize was going on. I just shut down. And I think that there was a primal thing here that switched, that kind of turned on in Pinbacker, where he came face to face with this huge thing. And you're right, something broke. Oh. And Mace had to descend into hell.
Yeah. If you want to talk about the divine elements of the sun as they're portrayed, it like that again, the physical presence of light and warmth of the sun, then the freezing cold of the mainframe coolant here is the opposite of that, and it kills Mace.
Yeah. We're coming in on another exquisitely paced sequence here. With, just another nightmare that hits really close to home.
Yeah.
Of needing to get somewhere.
And being so slow and clumsy.
Yeah. And just crawling and clawing your way. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen this film. I've actually lost count how many times, but I still get really, really stressed at this sequence of just like, come on, hurry up, hurry up.
And I mean, that tension is very illusory because they're in a stable orbit. There are now significantly fewer people here.
Yeah.
Kappa kind of has all the time in the world.
Well, except that he doesn't know it, but Pinbacker's in the bomb.
Yeah.
We know it, though. We are fully aware that Pinbacker is inside the payload.
And here is Icarus's final wound.
Yeah.
This is where, this is kind of another one of the thresholds that Kappa crosses.
Yeah.
Where there's no coming back from it.
Yeah. Nope. And that's the other thing about Mace is it's plausible he could have made it, except his foot got stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've never seen Mace fail at anything.
Yeah. But it's, again, such a human and such a plausible thing.
Right, yeah.
You get stuck.
Yeah, he gets stuck.
You can't feel you're in cold gel coolant. Like, it's so possible. And, yeah. Now we have a bit of a time.
Yeah, now we have some urgency.
Yeah.
And this is where Kappa now explicitly has to confront the nightmare he had earlier.
Yeah.
Only he remembers the nightmare, and looking out, as he will in a little while, he sees that it wasn't his nightmare at all.
No.
That he imagined something completely different than the reality.
Oh my god, get up.
Get up, get up, get up. Yeah, no, I feel you, bro. I feel you.
Seriously, dude.
How much do you think that suit weighs?
Yeah, well, a lot. Not an insignificant amount, you know.
Something about a golden path.
Yeah.
Or a corridor of light. I mean, leap of faith is a tired metaphor.
Yeah.
But the image here, this is not what Kappa's nightmare had been.
No.
And I mean the solution to that, the nightmare when you shut your eyes,
Yeah.
is that you have to go in eyes open.
Yeah. And there it is.
That isn't the surface of the sun that we see.
Not
We
at
see
all.
the surface of the sun a lot in this film. That isn't it.
Nope. And in the end, I mean, this is not his goal here. The fact that he's in front of the sun is kind of incidental almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was really afraid of literally plunging headlong into it, and at this point, when he comes face to face with it, it's in his peripheral.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
yeah, quite literally off in the peripheral. He can't see it at all.
yeah.
He's
Or if
shield-
he can, it's not important.
Yeah, that he's still shielded from it.
Yeah. But it's almost like, that the worst fear, it just sort of, you have a job.
Mm-hmm. Or you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
You have your reason for... Kappa's very lucky among us in that he has a reason for being here.
Yeah.
Right? And that's very clear to him.
Yeah.
And he actually has he can do his reason.
Yeah.
Lots of us go through life without any reason to be here.
Yeah.
And now he's falling towards that.
Yeah.
Like there's a tremendous inevitability, a momentum. Like
Yeah.
they've always been falling towards
Yeah.
the payload delivery point.
They're so tiny. And these little moments, the way that they're shot, I always, whenever I go for a while without seeing the film, I always feel like for a second it's like, oh God, my DVD's broke. No,
yeah, no, it's scratched
not.
or something. No, this is the sun warping space and time.
Yeah, this is just really well directed.
Like, if you ever want to sell me on a movie, just tell me that it has a group, like, that our heroes are brainy and curious.
Yeah.
And they're confronting, or courageously confronting the unknown.
Yeah.
That in Pinbacker's faith, those things are villainous.
Yeah.
Like that curiosity, that agency over your own fate is villainous and has to be punished horrifically.
Yeah.
And that our heroes have to confront that. That will be what sells me on it.
Yeah.
Like in Prometheus, Kappa would have been the villain.
Yeah.
Right? He would have been the Dr. Frankenstein who pretends to be God.
Yeah.
Well, he's not pretending to be God. He kind of fell into that role. And he's been falling further and further into that role ever since, and now it's his responsibility to hold agency over that power and use it responsibly for the betterment of everyone. And he does, because he can, because those aren't forbidden powers, and they never were, no matter what your nightmares are.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you have that power, then you have to wield it.
Mm-hmm.
Here we also see the bomb tumbling, like end over end, violently, but inside it's still, because it's large enough that I suppose it's supposed to exert its own gravity.
Yes, and that's why when they fall, they end up sitting up again? Yeah,
they fall down one side and then they kind of like skid to a halt and wind up being able to stand up. But the bomb has this absolute presence. It's in focus, it's clearly defined, it's well understood. Amid all this chaos, the bomb is a certainty.
Yeah.
How it behaves is up for...
Yeah.
Well, that's not something we're ever allowed to see, actually.
Yeah. And here, in this moment, Kappa literally, like, he stands at the line between faith and reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's double-edged, because the sun is reality. It's a thing.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of faith being put into that bomb.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, just because you associate it with the divinity doesn't mean the sun is actually God.
Yeah.
It has always only been this thing.
So the sun is both divine and real, and so is the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
It's both.
The difference is how you confront it and how you conceive of it.
Yeah.
And I think the film does an extraordinary job of telling us that the correct way, the heroic way, the courageous way is to understand it.
Yeah, and to go in with open, honest curiosity and, you know, to understand also how you just psychologically respond to these big things and be aware of those emotions as they come up as well.
What we're shown here finally in the final scene of the movie is that Kappa's moral imperative.
Yeah.
That understanding these things is moral.
Yes.
And necessary for our survival and our well-being.
Yeah.
And not only moral, but beautiful.
Yeah.
In explicit terms.
Oh.
And there, with the sunrise, something that was mortal,
yeah,
or fatal, it becomes life-giving.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there is this happy ending in a way, even though in so many ways this film can be very depressing, and like, I've come out of it before just feeling wrung out a little bit.
Drained and
wrecked. But in a really good way.
yeah, it's cathartic.
Yeah, it is. But,
and it comes to a very, I think, important conclusion about what sci-fi can be.
Yeah, and it's, you know, if this were given to anybody else, they would have, well, the hero has to survive. It's the journey, right? And
yeah.
No, that's not how the world works, and this is far more profound, and especially understanding that the sun has all of these metaphoric layers.
Yeah, that it is. It has always been, like, I don't want to say the first religions, or I don't even want to say always, but sun worship is a very big part of a lot of early human faiths, or even contemporary human faiths, and it has always loomed large in our psyche.
Yeah,
and not only for religious purposes, but for very pragmatic ones, right? Our first calendars.
Yep.
It governs our harvest. It governs our weather.
Yeah.
And it has this huge presence in our minds, and there's an imperative there to understand it.
Yeah.
And to wield that understanding carefully.
I'm curious as to where this clip is going to end. I have an idea, but I've never actually seen it. But the other thing I wanted to say that we didn't really have a chance to get to, because it was the eyes. The eye is our primary sense.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense that it shows up as a motif in this film, because, dogs have scent, cats have, like, scent and hearing. We have vision. That is our primary sense. Our brain is kind of wired to process
light.
And so it's very, very, it makes a lot of sense.
Anyways, it's one of our favorite movies.
Yes.
I think it's a very surprisingly elegant movie.
Yeah.
That has a lot of, it uses the medium of film very efficiently and very well.
Huh.
So I think we're going to sign off there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us on this very special Corrector's Commentary with our guest, Mia Steinberg.
Yay. Yes. Thank you for having me. This is kind of a dream, is just to, like, be able to tell people about sunshine. Now let me tell you why, for 2 hours, this film is wonderful.
Yeah, piece by piece, why this movie is rad.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining us. We hope to be back someday soon.
Yeah.
And, we hope you enjoyed the journey with us.